بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعليه الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum viewers, and welcome to question time. Due to certain technical issues we couldn't go online earlier. We are back here. Our lines are open. Please give us a call if there be any questions in regards to the topic which we are looking for quite some time now. It's the discussions on aqaid, on belief system. After discussing the need of religion, tawheed, attributes of God, prophecy or prophethood, we will be looking today the Prophet of Islam. If you may recall, we had mentioned that there are three ways for a person to recognize a prophet. Either it is that prophet performs miracles. Number two is there be any recordings of previous prophet who have mentioned that a future prophet gonna come. And number three, the people who lived during the lifetime of that prophet, they must bear witness that he is a prophet, or he is a noble person, and he is accepted by the society as an intellectual, as a just and noble person, not as a liar, not as a cheat, not as a corrupt person. When we look at these three principles for establishment of a prophethood, we tend to find all three befits our prophet, the Prophet of Islam. But prior to that, how they fit into these three categories or these three questions, I just wanted to point out to our viewers that if you look at the situation of humanity before the Prophet, and the place where Prophet was sent and what Prophet brought, then one would be able to would have a clear picture of the proof, or the establishment of the proof that the Prophet of Islam was sent, and he was a noble person, he was a trustworthy person, and he was given the book, the Quran. The establishment of the Quran also depends upon the establishment of the prophethood of our prophet, the last prophet. So if you look at the situation where we find that Torah, the book of Moses, have been changed, distorted, many strange beliefs were introduced in terms of religion, in regards to God himself, the existence of God. Then also you have the issue of the Bible as well. If you just look at how things that are mentioned in the Torah, it's very unfortunate to really read these things. For example, God fighting with Jacob, an incident that is mentioned in the scriptures, and eventually God, he himself, please Jacob to relieve and release him, otherwise it will look very awkward that God is defeated, for example. So this tale is mentioned in the Torah. Then we also find that now na'udhu billah, or God forbid, or far be this act from the Prophet, and that is the fornication of David with a chaste woman, where David sends the husband of this woman to a battlefield and get him killed, and also the fornication of Prophet Lot, after drinking, after going into the state of drunkenness, and then committing adultery with his own daughter, far be it from the Prophet. So I mean, you find these type of stories tales in regards to the prophets in the Old Testament and the New Testament, as well as many of the Christian scholars, they themselves agree, many of the Christian clergies, priests agree that what we have in regards to Bible is just a synopsis of some of the teachings of discourses of Christ. It's not exactly how Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, really mentioned, but it was completed later on. As we are all fully aware of the conference of Nicaea, where the king compiled accepted the present testament or the present Bible that we have, and the authenticity is not really very profound and accepted by many, but they say that this is a book and this is what we ought to follow. But when you look at the book itself and the teachings of the book, when the holy book is talking about the prophet in such a fashion, where would the community or those who want to follow and want to be religious will end up? So you have a situation where humanity have reached to this level. In Arabia, for example, they were burying the daughters alive, or the rich were getting rich and the poor were getting poor, the slavery and the persecution of the slaves. So a situation where there's a desperate need of a savior. That's one. And number two, you also find what people have done in regards to religion, in regards to true authentic religions such as Christianity, Judaism, and what has happened with their holy scriptures, with their holy books, and how they all have been deviated. So it was something that was very much required, that a message be sent, and a message be sent with the condition that this message will be protected till the day of judgment, because God entrusted the prophets, and then the prophet, the companions and the people, and God saw that the message have been deviated. They haven't, the mankind couldn't really protect the message, or if it was protected, it was kept to very close individuals. For example, you have the Gospel of Barnabas, which talks about Tawheed, but unfortunately, as we still have Unitarian Christians today who follow the Gospel of Barnabas, but unfortunately the message of Trinity which was introduced, so therefore the majority of the message was distorted, was deviated because of the conspiracies of the kings of the time, politicians of the time. Then Allah said that I will send a message that will be protected till the day of judgment, which is one of the miracles of Islam, that we say that the Quran is a word of God that will be protected by God Himself till the day of judgment. So now here Amirul Mu'mineen in Nahjul Balagha mentions or describes the state of the world at the beginning of Islam. He says that Allah sent the Prophet when the mission of other prophets had stopped and the people were in slumber for a long time. Evil was raising its head. All matters were in disruption and in the flames of war, while the world was devoid of brightness and full of open deceitfulness. Its leaves had turned yellow, and there was absence of hope about its fruits. While the water had gone underground, the minarets of guidance had disappeared, and signs of destruction had appeared. It was stern to its people and frowned in the face of its seeker. Its fruits was vice, and its food was carcass. Its inner dress was fear, and its outer cover was the sword. So this was the situation. Imam Ali is describing in a very poetic, very eloquent way that there was no hope, that the the fruit was vice, and the inner dress was fear, and the outer cover was the sword. People were just the people were just carrying out zulm, killing each other, conquering land, putting people under persecution. And in this state you have the noblest of all creation, the best of all creation, the Afzalul Anbiya, the most kind natured in terms of his etiquettes, in terms of his ethics, in terms of his trustworthiness, that a man was sent in the Arabia who was known to be Muhammad ibn Abdullah. And if you look at his personality or his character, we would find that those Arabs, when they talk about him, they would always refer him as Al-Amin, as someone who is trustworthy. And as we know that Arabs, when it comes to giving titles, when it comes to describing someone, they are very, very precise. They are very, in a way, stingy. They don't really, say things that goes beyond their sort of comprehension, or they would say things that they really mean it. So you have Arabs who described him as Al-Amin, and this is also a miracle in itself, that a man who was considered as the trustworthy, he is saying that he's been sent by God and he is bringing the Quran. And illiterate, meaning that unlettered, who never learned anything, never learned to read, never learned to write, but he is bringing the most eloquent word, the most sort of fascinating amongst the Arabs, where already language and eloquency was at its zenith. So their Prophet brings that message, and he says this is from God. Now, as they have trusted him, as they are giving all their belongings or property or money or whatever they had before going to different cities to the Prophet, and expecting and accepting that he will be the caretaker of it, and all of a sudden, the Prophet comes and he says that, okay, fine, if you accept me, to accept this as well. Where the Prophet stands at the mountain and he says that, will you believe that there is an army which is about to attack? He's just asking a question. Will you believe that? Then they would say that, yes, we will believe it. Although there might not be any army, but the Prophet is saying, will you believe that there is an army behind this mountain that was ready to attack? They say, yes, we'll believe it. Then finally Prophet mentions that he's been sent by God with the message, which is the Quran, to really bring out humanity from darkness. Obviously, as Prophet, the message of the Prophet is universal. The message of the Prophet for all corners of the world. But as it started in the Arabia, obviously it addressed to the Arabs first, and it tend to have that covering, which is the language of Arabic. But in terms of the principles are quite universal, and even that language as well, there's a purpose and there's a reason why the Quran was sent in Arabic, which we'll deal with it later on when we are talking about Quran from the theological point of view. Now, if you look at Islam and the Prophet of Islam, it is like as if I open a book and I'm trying to just read the last chapter of the book. So it will be very difficult to comprehend and understand the last chapter. So therefore one really have to start from the very beginning in order to understand the Prophet, which is from the time of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam and the other prophets as well, where Islam accepts, where the Prophet says that a Muslim is the one who believes in all of the previous prophets. So therefore, if one wants to examine, learn, educate themselves about Islam, it's not just go there and opening the 10th chapter without understanding the previous chapters, what they have talked about. So they really have to look into the story of the previous prophets and their messages, and how the people have persecuted these prophets and have tried to stop the message, and then what was the message of these prophets, what was what they were talking about. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the Bible itself, when it tends to talk about Abraham, Hazrat Ibrahim and Ismail and Ishaq, it clearly points out to that the prophet will be raised from the lineage of Prophet Ismail, and then he will be from someone from the Gentiles. And the Arab and the Jews were waiting for a prophet to come from the Gentiles, from those who were the Bedouins. And now, as we are approaching to the second part of the discussion, as I mentioned earlier, like we said, there are three reasons to believe in the prophethood of our prophet or any prophet. Number one, we said that the people living at that time, they should really recognize him and must talk about him and accept him to be a person who is trustworthy, who is just, who is not corrupt. That's one, who is intellectual. Then, as we pointed out, that during that period we had the Arabs of that time, what they have said in regards to the prophet. Then after that, we said early scriptures, previous scriptures, they must also talk about the future prophet that is about to come. So when we look at the previous scriptures, even after them being distorted, even after them being sort of changed so much, we still find traces in these scriptures in regards to the future prophet that will be coming. And that is why we tend to see that Quran always speak to Bani Israel and talks about their scriptures. Why don't you go look? Why don't you go see where your scriptures are saying that, I will be coming, meaning that the prophet is speaking to them, and the prophet will say, I will be coming as a guide, as a prophet, to really guide mankind. And many have traveled to such area, to such a place, so that they bear witness to the prophet who would come. And many have converted during this time and accepted Islam after being following the Judaic faith. And also the Christians as well, we tend to see that they have also accepted. Now, in the Torah, it talks about that a prophet will be raised among the Gentiles, and prophet was someone from among the Gentiles, because the Jews, for them to really accept a prophet being raised from there was unacceptable, because they always considered themselves to be of a special sort of honorable lineage, and for them to really accept from a Gentile a prophet was not possible. It would have been a disrespect and dishonor for them to come under the wilayat or the guardianship of such a prophet. But God usually wants, or the sunnah, the methodology of God is that way, that whosoever is proud, God will bring that person or that community down to really accept. So accepting a prophet from Gentiles for them was like, for example, how you have this class system in Hinduism. To accept someone from an untouchable to be the ruler over the Brahmins, over that super class, it will be a very disrespect. So here God wants to bring the arrogance, the ghurur, the arrogance down. And the same if you look at in the story of Bani Israel, where Pharaoh considered himself to be the king of kings, right? And then here Ramses II. And here as well, once again, from Jews, Jews were persecuted, Jews were used as slaves, Jews were considered as a low part of the society. From there you have a prophet bringing down the king of kings, Pharaoh, where he's maghrur. So God, the methodology, the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is such that he wants to establish justice. Wherever there is arrogance, wherever there is sort of this negative pride, wherever there is arrogant, negative pride, there will be injustice taking place. The person who become arrogant, he will never be just. He will be, he will act in a fashion that will go against justice. He will oppress people. But there is an underlying factor that God have laid in this created world, in the creation, and that underlying factor is based on justice. No matter what, no matter how tyrant the ruler be, justice will prevail. Justice will be done, regardless of that person be an outward Muslim or a non-Muslim, regardless of the community, who are under the ruler of such a person, who are under such a ruler, justice will prevail. For example, what we see even today, it is the best example, like these tyrants, these arrogant leadership of the Middle East, Hosni Mubarak, if you want to take it, or Gaddafi, or Saddam Hussein, regardless of the people, or in other places as well, you would see that if the leadership is oppressing, eventually after a course of time he will be toppled and justice will be done. He will meet his fate. Same as we are seeing now in Saudi Arabia, for example, where they are going off board in order to remain in power, doing actions that are unjust, and justice will prevail there as well. So now going back onto the theological argument, where we find the traces of prophet being mentioned in the Bible, and the traces of our prophet being mentioned in the Old Testament as well. In numerous places, I inform you of a prophet who will come and will be raised a nation of power, for example, and he will be from the second son of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And then you have Isa alayhi salam mentioning about a future prophet. He will come and he will deliver the message of Tawheed. So even if you look at certain traditions which are accepted by the Sunni schools, when Prophet had that revelation, he goes to the Christian monk, the Christian doctor, the Hazrat Khatija, and then she says that, okay, something of what happened to the previous prophet, it has happened to him. So it's a Christian doctor, and he accepts that he is the prophet and the wahi have been sent to him. Or the famous story of when Prophet was still young and he goes to Syria for trade, and when he goes to Syria for trade, the Christian monk, he sees the Prophet and he recognizes him to the Prophet, as they all rested in the monastery, but the Prophet did not attend. Then this man inquires and he says, is there someone who hasn't arrived yet? Because I see the miraculous cloud that is covering the Prophet. And then he said, yes, there's a young lad who has not come, who's taken care of the goods there. So he said, invite him. So the monk invited him, walked towards the Prophet out of respect, and then he kind of informed others as well that he will be the future prophet. Now these are the traces that we find. Finally, I just wanted to conclude, as we are running out of time and I know we started late. We will be looking at the miraculous nature of the Quran in our next session, because Quran was given to our Prophet as he was meditating at the age of 40. He was asked to really recite and read, or to declare the message of Islam, to declare the Quran to people. So therefore we will be looking at that inshallah. We really appreciate for being with us today, and I would leave you with a few questions that would be interesting if our viewers attend to those, and then perhaps if they are here again next week, they could really answer them from the discussion that we had. Number one, describe the conditions of the books of the previous prophets. What we talked about, how the situation was, maybe pointing out to certain events or certain stories that are distorted. Number two, indicate a few points that illustrate the alteration of Torah. And then number three, the authenticity of the Bible. If you could look into the authenticity of the Bible, how Bible is authentic. The synopsis, as we spoke, only certain synopsis remains of the Prophet Isa alayhi salam, but not the whole detailed message. Explain the importance of the prophethood of the Prophet of Islam, why it is so important, the prophethood of our Prophet of Islam. What was the state of humanity, and what was the state of the religions at that time? What are the ways of establishing the prophethood of the Prophet of Islam? As we pointed out, there are three ways, how and what these ways are. So we hope to see you again next week in question time on Hidayat. Thank you very much, and goodbye from Hidayat.